Hello and welcome to Ginger Prime. My name is Brian and this is my Dark Knight controller guide for Final Fantasy XIV Shadowbringers. In this guide I'm going to show you how I set up my controller, how I lay out my HUD, and how I set up my skills and the reason why I set my skills the way that I do to hopefully help maximize my performance, reduce my muscle memory, and overall increase my just comfort with the job on a controller in the world of Final Fantasy. So there's a lot that we're going to cover here, and this guide is exceptionally long. These guides tend to go a little bit longer, but I do want to say thank you so much to all of my members here on the channel. You can see them over here on the left-hand side of the video. They're the reason why you're not going to get mid-rolls on my videos, especially my guides. So thank you guys, each and every one of you, for making that possible and hopefully help making this video uninterrupted so that players can get in and have the best experience on a controller. So again, thank you very much. Before we dive into the guide itself, I do want to say if you're looking for more Final Fantasy content after this, please check out Ginger Gaming Radio. I have the Crystal Core Radio podcast focusing in on Square Enix, Final Fantasy XIV, Final Fantasy XI, so much Final Fantasy. I hope you check it out and enjoy. It's been a real pleasure to create that content, and I love the fact that people are enjoying it as much as they are. But all those plugs out of the way, it's time to dive into the Dark Knight and really just, hopefully help give you the tools that you need to really enjoy the job the best way possible on a controller, because I'm biased. Alright, so let's go ahead and dive in. First things first, we're going to go into system and character configuration. If you've never used a controller, you can always toggle this on and off from just standard PC hotbar setup to controller setup. And those are two separate toggles, and they actually can change your type of camera and more. I typically go with a legacy type camera. This gives me that full rounded and moving ability to really kind of get out of dodge. But if you like to have the backup ability just when you press back on the stick, you can have that as well. Either work on keyboard and mouse and controller, so feel free to kind of play around with that. You also have a couple of settings. I like to have these both on at all times. From the perspective, I'm going to go into the hotbar settings, and in hotbar settings I've got hide unassigned slots. If I turn that off, you can see here that all these little hotbars like pop up out of the middle of nowhere, all these little gray spots. Yeah, I don't like that. I want to be able to keep those clean and have these skills floating. I'm not going to use or click on any of these with a mouse and keyboard. These are just to help generally communicate cooldowns to me, like in the case of the Dark Knight Living Dead. It's important to know when that's up, especially with a 300-second recast timer. That's going to tell me when this is available. You can position this any which way you want. I am, for some reason, putting it up here just because I want to make sure that I'm very well aware of it and separate it from my normal kind of DPS rotation cooldowns. And then from here, I also turned off display hotbar numbers, being that I use hotbars so frivolously across the game, and as a part of my HUD layout, I want to make sure that those are turned off, so that way I don't have these random numbers just floating around there. Under the sharing tab, you can see here I've got it, especially for the cross hotbar, 7 and 8 are shared. That means no matter what job I'm playing, crafter, gatherer, battle, it doesn't matter. Whatever skills I put there are going to be shared. This is perfect for mounts, minions, things like that, especially targeting macros. We'll show you those here later in the video as well. Under the cross tab here as well, I have always display. I turned off crossbar help, but if you're learning the job, if you're learning the skills and especially the names and trying to associate them with pictures, you keep this on. This will actually help you out in the long run, being able to kind of have that off. For me, keeps everything clean. I run in hold mode. You can play around with toggle and mix mode, but you do lose features like the expanded cross hotbar, which is like left trigger, right trigger, and right trigger, left trigger. And we'll show you how we got that configured here in a little bit. So ultimately, the goal would be to get you to hold mode. However, you do have toggled and mix. Toggle is basically, instead of holding, you just press it like a button, and it's going to remain active until you press it again. Mixed is a combination of both, and it can get kind of tricky, and sometimes it might even trip you up. Also down here, I've got always display the W cross hotbar, return to the cross hotbar after W cross hotbar input, and then position the W cross hotbar separately from the cross hotbar. Here it is off. If I turn it on, you can see here I've only got it slightly differently positioned, so you can play around with what makes the most sense for you. If this is turned on, you can actually resize the different hotbars here for the double cross hotbar independently. Now it's important to note you cannot drag and drop skills onto your expanded cross hotbar here. This is essentially a shortcut to the real cross hotbars, which you can see here under custom. Enable W cross hotbar with simultaneous left trigger and right trigger double tap. I have all 4 and the directional buttons enabled, and this we'll go over this in the skill overview, but as a preview, for all my tanks, I put my same skills in the same spot. So my stun is always where my stun's at. My arm's length is always where my arm's length at. It's muscle memory time. You don't need to rethink that, hey, I'm playing a Dark Knight versus maybe a Paladin, that these skills are different. So try to lay out things similarly, and that's why I end up using the directional buttons. But you can see here it's linked to hotbar 3 left and cross hotbar 3 right. These are job specific, and so I can sit here, if I click out of this window and hold down the R1 button, I can tab to any of my hotbars themselves specifically. But you can see here it is the same thing. If I move that, you're going to see it moved over here. Again, you cannot drag and drop skills onto it. You can't even take skills off of it. So just note that that's kind of how that's set up. It works out real well, but it's just a window into the actual hotbar customization piece of it. Then same kind of thing applies to the right hand side. So that's how that's all configured. The expanded LT and RT here, and RT and LT, are hotbar 2 left, which are essentially these skills. And I can see that by going to page 2. That's where this is at. That's where Living's Dead's at. All that. We'll go over that again. And then hotbar 7 right, which is essentially a shared bar. So if I go over to 7, you can see here I've got my Mount Roulette, I've got my Wanderer's Tales, my Sprint, my car, which is a 4-seater, and Incredible, and hopefully that event comes back. Limit breaks and some targeting macros that I will show you guys here later on in the video itself. I know I keep saying later on in the video, like I said, this is a big video. You can check the playhead of this video to be able to jump to different sections as well if you're looking just for more information on that. Lastly, one thing I do want to say when I talk about return to cross hotbar after W cross hotbar input under the cross tab, this allows me to be able to kind of fire off like a one-off or a cooldown, and it automatically returns me right back into my focus. So that way I am not sitting here using these things as rotations. You can do that. If you turn that off, you'd actually, when you double tap in, you'd be here and you could kind of use this as a rotational piece. It's up to you. I recommend, for me, that it just works from a comfort level to being able to use these skills as one-off skills, off the global cooldown skills, things like that, that will ultimately just make it a little bit easier and more comfortable to play with. Now that's a lot that we just covered, and again, if you have any questions, let me know in the comments below. That's just how I have all this configured. Now, I want to go and spend just a little bit of time touching on targeting and filters here. You can see here when my weapon is sheathed, I have it under custom, meaning this is what I'm targeting. The reason I turn off party members is that when you're playing, you can target party members by using the up and down keys on the D-pad. So for me, I find no reason in targeting left and right. Then when my weapon is drawn, I am focusing in on just enemies, aggroing enemies, duty specific enemies. Anything else, I don't care about targeting. Now this is all just for your left and right. You'll still be able to cycle through party members via up and down. And then down here at the bottom, if you needed additional customization settings, holding LB and then pressing either Y, B, X, or A. And if you're a PlayStation controller user, that's square, circle, triangle, X, cross, or whatever. And so they've got that set up to, you can kind of say, hey, I want to just target Alliance members, or I only want to target, everything, or I want to only target a few other things. You can end up having these additional, filters, and there's predefined filters, just FYI, that you can use. Otherwise, you can use anything you want, and that will end up falling down into the custom tab. Lastly, I do want to say down here, when my set selection, this is essentially what you see here is a set. You see set 1. You have 8 sets as a controller player. When my weapon is sheathed, I want to cycle through hotbar 1, 7, and 8. And when my weapon is drawn, I only want to cycle through hotbar 1. I lock myself down to just 1. And to give you guys an appearance of what that looks like, we'll say apply. If I say R bumper, see my weapon is not out, so it is targeting and cycling through my different hotbars. If I draw my weapon, which is a down click on the left stick, I can, if I just press R bumper, it's not going to cycle. I would have to hold and use a face button or a D-pad button to cycle through my hotbars. Why this is important is like with the weapon drawn, if I press left and right, you can see I'm only able to target enemies, and you can see a couple, I guess, enemy striking dummies in this housing area. But if my weapon is put away, Now all of a sudden I can start to target multiple different other things, anything that is targetable as a part of this filter. And that's why it's important to kind of play around with your filters, especially as a tank, because as you're attacking, you want to be able to make sure that you're hitting all enemies within range. Now you could do this a couple of ways, and again we'll do the skill review here in a bit. I can do an AoE and follow it up with my AoE combo here at 80. And now I've got 2 enemies on my striking or my hate list, my threat list right here. Now I can target one a couple ways. Now if I'm holding down like the right trigger or the left trigger, I can use the bumpers or R1, L1 to kind of easily target between any kind of enemy in front of me that's a part of this cone. So that's nice and easy, especially when you have a couple of enemies that you want to manage themselves. Otherwise, you can also hold down L bumper and hit up and down to cycle through any enemy that's on your hate list. You'll see the red here. That means I'm the tank. I'm the threat. They're going to be focusing in on me. However, if this was not red, if it was any other color, that means they're focused elsewhere, and you're going to want to make sure that as the tank, you're picking all of those up. If for some reason you're not, make sure you have, in case for Dark Knight, Grit turned on. This is essentially your threat builder. Everything and anything that you do at this point will generate hate, so it's important that you go ahead and do that. Okay, so let's go ahead and now spend some time in my hut. This is essentially the other part of it. And when we do this, you can see my blood gauge is listed right here. My dark side gauge is listed right here. Hotbar 3, and the reason I go with Hotbar 3 is because I don't want numbers as associated with these skills. This is not for me to click. You're not going to be clicking these. These are just to communicate more information to me so that I'm aware as a tank of what's going on and what's available at any given time. Any skills that you want to put here are perfectly fine. So do not feel like these are the 4 skills that you absolutely have. Find what works for you that helps feed you the information, so that way you're not having to look over the screen, especially as you're learning your rotation and that muscle memory aspect of it. You'll be good to go. Left cross hotbar 3, left and right. My main cross hotbar. I got my limit gauge down here. A couple other things like that. You can see here my enemy list. This is real important as a tank. Make sure that this is within like at least your peripheral vision as you're playing. And then over here I have my party list. But for the most part, this is going to be the box that you spend most of your time in. If you think of kind of like with different squares, as you go further and further out, especially when you get focused, that kind of draws in inward. So it gets smaller and smaller and smaller. So try to keep the information quickly accessible to you. I've got my target bar up here, and then I have my enfeeblements and my enhancements and my other buffs listed right here. You can easily split this up by going into your settings and picking on split elements into 3 groups, so that way you can separate your buffs and your debuffs if you so desire. But any element that you select here, you can always pull up the UI element settings grid and switch to simple mode or keep it into like advanced mode right here. You can see if I turn that off, I definitely have a much more detailed and graphical appearance to the UI itself. You can resize things. I would recommend that as you play and get comfortable, figure out what you actually want, what you want in simplified mode, what sizes you want things to be, and that will end up helping you out in the long run. Alright, so now it's time to kind of do my skill overview and how I've got things positioned. As a part of my cooldowns, I've got Plunge. This is a great skill to weave in as a part of your rotation. Namely, it's got a 30-second charge time, but you can see here, especially at level 80, you get 2 charges. Also, just as a note, if you're not level 80, you can always preset your skills. Most of them are going to automatically upgrade, allowing you to have a lot of flexibility. Find what works as you level the job, though. So just kind of note that this is my recommendation layout. You can feel free to continue to customize it how you want. Then over here I've got Living Shadow. I have this to really kind of communicate Living Shadow. It's got a 2-minute recast time. This summons, and let's just go ahead and do it because it's just that awesome. You basically take a shadow out of yourself and boom. Now he's going to start attacking the enemies with me. You can see here that he's just going to wait for me to actually start attacking, and that's important. But with the 2-minute recast time, you're going to be able to do a lot with it. It also costs 50 points of your blood gauge, so it is quite expensive, but you do want to use this because you can follow this up with Delirium to be able to, bust out some blood splitters or some quittuses here as well. You can see he's taking a knee and he's gone. So he's going to be out for a little bit of time. There's also a delay before he starts actually attacking and applying damage. So just note, you want to be living shadowing as best as you can. Then I can have Delirium, which is on like to help communicate that it's on cooldown. This essentially is a 90-second recast time, so it's important to be able to try to get this because that will give you as many blood splitters or quittuses as possible. And then I've got Reprisal. Reprisal is a great, especially AoE defensive ability, but it basically reduces damage the enemies can produce by 10%. This is great if you're the off tank as well. So if the tank is, if you're doing 8-man content with 2 tanks, and the boss is going to do, a tank buster, putting Reprisal on him is going to help save and reduce your other tank, your off tanks, or the main tank's damage that he takes as well. So kind of keep that in mind. 60-second recast time, meaning you can be popping this off pretty frequently. It's fantastic in AoE pools because it applies to all enemies with an area effect, and it's still also fantastic for single targets as well. On my W cross hotbar left, I've got an Ether in this case, and I also have a potion. Feel free to always use and put potions and things like that on your bars where necessary, where needed. This is just to help kind of overall increase my survivability, and also, especially as a Dark Knight, MP is so critically important to how and what I'm able to do, especially if you look at the Blackest Night. This is a great skill, and we'll talk about it here more in a second, but I want to make sure that I have MP needed to be able to do what I need to do. Then over here, I've got Blood Weapon. You can see I have it listed over here as well. The reason is that if I'm in AoE rotation, I don't want to have to kind of pop over here and then double tap over here to be able to get that. I think that ends up being a little bit confusing. So there's certain things that I'd like to have like on both sides for kind of a cooldown perspective, just to make my life a little bit easier. So Blood Weapon is going to increase your blood gauge by 10 and restores MP upon landing weapon skills or spells. This does not stack when hitting multiple targets with a single attack. It's going to last for 10 seconds, and it's a 60-second recast time. I recommend having this up as much as possible because that's going to help fill your blood gauge and allow you to do some really good things with it. Abysmal Drain is going to deal unaspected damage with a potency of 200 to the target and all enemies near it, and with the additional effect of this is going to restore your own HP. This is really great. This is such a help, especially when you do big AoE pulls. You have a 60-second recast time on it though, so just kind of pay attention to where that's working out for you. And then over here, I've got Living Shadow. The reason I've got Living Shadow over here, and I also have it over here, is because I love it. And at the same time, if I'm doing an AoE rotation, I want to be able to pop up, pull out Living Shadow as needed. Same thing over here on my single target rotation. And that's kind of how we have the left and right hand side worked out. So let's go ahead and do that right now. On the left hand side, I've got Unleash. This is my big AoE, tanky ability. This is going to hit everybody within that range. It's got an aspect of 150 to all nearby enemies. And then I follow this up with Starbolt Soul. This is going to have a damage of all enemies within it, and the combo potency is going to be 160 if you combo it with Unleash here. So this is like, boom, and then you want to follow this up as well. It's visually quite impressive. It's a beautiful skill to have, etc. Then I've got Quittus. This is going to be based off my blood gauge. So as you see here, as I'm doing this AoE combo, it is filling my blood gauge. So just to kind of note, you're going to get 20 points of blood gauge every time you do Starbolt Soul. If you combo this with Blood Weapon, you're going to get 10 here, and then you're going to end up getting 30 here. So you can fill your gauge really fast with Blood Weapon. So keep that in mind. This cost 50, so in this case, if I go ahead and do both of them, you're going to see I'm going to drain my blood gauge, and this has a potency of 210 to all nearby enemies, so obviously much more powerful than both Unleash at 150 and Starbolt Soul at 160 if comboed. If you just do this one, it's 100. It's weaker than Unleash, so they really want you to combo that. And then I have got Flood of Shadow. This is going to deal unaspected damage to a potency of 300 to all enemies in a straight line before you. It's also going to grant Dark Side, which is going to increase my damage dealt by 10%. It will last for 30 seconds, and that's this gauge right here. So if I go ahead and fire this off, I have to actually have a target, boom, and if I actually do a line in this case, I get both of those with a potency of 300, and now you can see my dark side gauge is counting down at 60 seconds, thus increasing my overall damage. The reason I have this all over here is that this, while it costs 3000 MP, which can be quite significant, you want to make sure you've got dark gauge up because this is just going to help increase your overall damage. It's important to note because just from an actions and traits perspective, this is a part of Flood of Darkness. Flood of Darkness and Edge of Darkness are these skills, and they actually upgrade as, later on to Edge of Shadow and Flood of Shadow. So don't, like if I'm naming it Flood of Shadow, note that that's just Flood of Darkness from that perspective. So that's an auto upgrade ability. Anyway, so that's AoE rotation piece. I have Carve and Spit, which is a great off the global cooldown attack for 450. Reason here is that if I'm doing kind of an AoE rotation, I want to be able to just kind of pop this off as necessary to get a little extra damage here off the global cooldown without having to pop around and hop around my hotbars. Then over here, like I said, I've got Delirium. This is going to allow me to just basically Quitus as much as I want, or Blood Splitter as much as I want for the time remaining. So you can just kind of see here, you want to get as many of those as you can and possible. And then I got Salted Earth. This is a macro, and again, we'll show off my macros here later on. This allows me to put down Salted Earth on the ground on the target in question, and thus I can continue to do some damage. And this is fantastic. We'll go over that skill actually right now, just so I don't forget. Salted Earth, it creates a patch of Salted Earth on the ground, and it deals unexpected damage with a potency of 60 to any enemies that enter, and it's going to last for 15 seconds. So it's a nice little dot on the ground, and this is also fantastic for AoEs as well. So any kind of big pack of mobs, popping Salted Earth is going to be great. It's got a 90-second recast time, so keep that in mind. You're not going to be doing this every every minute, but it's at least every minute and a half in this regards. Then I've got Blackest Nights. This is going to create a barrier around you that absorbs damage to only 25% of your target's maximum HP. So this is a great shield that you can apply to yourself or to others. Now this is actually going to grant a Dark Arts effect when the barrier is completely absorbed. So if you get hit for 25% damage, you're going to get Dark Arts, and consuming Dark Arts is actually going to basically do that instead of MP to execute either Edge of Shadow or Flood of Shadow. So note that especially from an MP perspective, it's like getting a free one, but it's going to have some tactical skill that you're going to need to use. So I would recommend, especially putting this on somebody who is squishy, if there's going to be a big room-wide attack, a stacking mechanic, because it's going to give you a free Edge of Shadow or or a Flood of Shadow in this regards, because they all cost the same. So you can do this, you can help prevent damage and then actually put out more damage for free, for yourself. So just kind of keep that in mind. It also, again, acts as a great defensive cooldown, even if it doesn't consume the 25%. It has to happen within the 7-second duration. So you do have a window. Prepare for that mentally as to when to be able to apply it, and you could apply it to any target member, or you can apply it to yourself and get that additional buff. And you can see it nice counting down here as well. All right, right hand side. Think single target for the most part right over here. I've got Hard Slash. This is just your base starter attack with the potency of 200. Then this follows up with Hard Slash with its potency of 300. It's going to restore your MP. And then I've got Soul Eater. This is going to have that combo potency of 400. It's going to restore your own HP. So you have an MP restore, an HP restore, and this is going to increase your blood gauge by 20. So the two things that increase your blood gauge without blood weapon is going to be right here with Stalwart Soul on the combo and Soul Eater on the combo. So be sure to kind of to prepare for that. If you got Blood Weapon on, you'll get 10 here, 10 here, and then you'll end up getting 30 here. So that is 50. Boom. Now you can call out Living Shadow, and you'll be good to go in that regards. We already covered Carve and Split. Again, it's over here in the same position to reduce kind of muscle memory errors. And then I've got Edge of Shadow and Flood of Shadow. You can always change out Flood of Shadow for another skill. Like one thing I've been kind of testing out, and I haven't committed fully to it yet, is Blackest Night, where Flood of Shadow is. So just kind of like pay attention as I play Dark Knight if I end up making that commitment over here. And then I've got Living Shadow. This is essentially your your spectral form, which is fantastic. I love it. Oh man, Dark Knight's so good. All right, like we've covered here, Blood Weapon is the same. Then I've got Dark Missionary. This is going to allow you to reduce magic damage to party members within range for 15 seconds by 10%. This is just great, especially with room-wide AoE damage that's going out. Just try to apply this 90-second cooldown. It's great. Remember, it also helps yourself, so even if you're not really helping out your party too much, if they're too far away, it doesn't matter. It can help get you through it, allow you to survive. You got Rampart. This is a reduction of 20% and a 90-second cooldown. This is every tank has this ability. Every tank of mine has it in the same spot. Shadow Wall is an additional reduction of 30% damage. This is massive. It's got a 2-minute cooldown, so you can really help reduce damage that you take. So if you have a time, you can always put this on, the Blackest Night on somebody else, and you can put Shadow Wall on yourself, and just overall, like you and the healer will be able to pretty much survive through almost all things. Dark Mind is a magic magic vulnerability by 20% reduction. So this is not for physical, but still at the same time you can help reduce magical damage that's incoming. Arm's Length, this is the best skill in the world in my opinion. Great for AoE pulls. It's going to apply 20% slow when it's struck. So as you're doing this, again a 2-minute cooldown, but this is great. I would apply this first, get everybody slow. That's going to help reduce the damage that's coming in, and then you can play around with Reprisal, Rampart, things like that to help overall mitigate even more incoming damage. And Shirk is going to divert 25% of your hate to the target party member. Great for tank swapping. In all honesty, having Grit on, which is essentially the tank mode, I haven't yet seen a reason why not to have Grit, and I wonder if in future updates we'll see it eventually removed. But Shirk is a way that you can help transition that, and Provoke, but we'll cover that in a second. And then Interject is a way to interrupt a target action, has no damage to it, so this is very situational. So if you want to silence a target, if you can silence a skill, just you'll have to learn to feel it out when you want to use Interject in that regards. All right, now we're back on to page 2. Here we've talked about Reprisal. Low Blow is my stun, and I have it all the same way. Even on DPS, my stun is always in the same spot because it's so ingrained into my muscle memory. In this case, I also have Plunge. Again, you have a potency of 200. This is perfect to close the gap, but also to weave into any kind of attack rotation. And so this is fantastic. I would totally recommend using it, and especially as a part of your DPS, to help increase your DPS. Then I have Unmend. This is a great ranged ability. So if I'm just over here, when I'm playing, I can just pull from a range with Unmend as Dark Knight, and also close the gap as needed there as well. And then I have Provoke. This is going to put me on the top of the hate list for the enemies themselves. Grit is my take stance, and then I have Living Dead, which essentially says, hey, if my HP is going to fall below 0, this will put me into a living dead state, and I'll have to be cured. It does, it will run out, so it is a great skill. But for me, I have it with a macro to help communicate to my healers, saying, hey, by the way, using Living Dead, please make sure that you heal me. Okay, so lastly, let's go ahead and take a look at some of our macros that I've got positioned here. As far as it goes, you can see here I've got 1, 2. This is basically targeting macros. I'll focus in on 2 because it's the same as 1 except for it has an extra line. It sets my first target that I'm actually selected as my focus target. Then it's going to mark that target with an enemy attack. Then it's going to change target to you can have back or forward. Either way, it doesn't matter. Then it's going to mark that second target with attack 2. So that's kind of a 1 and 2. And then it's going to return my focus back onto target 1. Let me show you guys that in action. So if I got 2 targets, and it works for more than 2, this is just to help communicate easily to your party, like, hey, here's my kill order. If I just apply it, you can see here now I've got a 1 and 2 marked on these targets, and you can see my focus is right back on 1. So it happens really quick. It's really great to be able to mark multiple targets in that way. Back into the user macros. So I've got that. I have 6, which is basically a focus target countdown just to communicate that to players. And I have 1, which is going to say party. It adds a little bit of flair to all aboard the pain train. Same concept as marking my target, focusing my target, having that UI set up that way. From a Salted Earth perspective, you can see here, it's just AC, Salted Earth T. This means that you don't end up having to place it manually, especially with the controller. It's going to say whatever you're targeting, that's where you're going to end up placing that ability. And the same thing for Living Dead. It's going to say, hey, I used Living Dead, get ready to heal, just so that they are aware that it's been used and they don't find themselves caught off guard and you end up just dying randomly for no reason whatsoever in that case. Let's see here. Do I have any other macros I wanted to make sure that I've got set up for you that is important? Okay, cool. I think that essentially covers the macro section. If I missed anything, guys, I apologize. Let me know if you got any questions in the comments below. I'd love to make sure that you have the best and most fun with Dark Knight. Again, thanks to all the channel members for making this video uninterruptible with ads from Google. And yeah, I love you guys. I love your faces. Thanks for checking this out. If you feel like I earned your sub, if you feel like I earned that like, be sure to hit the like button, hit that subscribe button, and let me know if you do, so that way I can thank you and welcome you officially to the Soul Nation. Anyway, that's going to wrap it up. Thanks so much, guys. I will see you soon and hope to see you in my next video. But until then, take care. This video is sponsored by me, Ginger Prime. Hopefully you'll check out my podcast channel, Ginger Gaming Radio, which we have lots of guests, lots of great conversations, and even more highlights. Links are in the description below. Let me know what you think. Thanks.